Something horrible arrived with the rain. I'm visiting my brother's cabin in Washington State. He let me come here after my divorce, get away from all the nonsense and clear my head for a couple weeks. It's beautiful out here. The quaint little hut, exactly what I had been expecting. It's surrounded by dense forest, and you have to take a long dirt road to reach it. It's wonderful. Before I arrived, my brother informed me that he had stocked the hut with groceries, enough to last a month if I decided I wanted to stay that long. He was leaving it up to me, knowing what hell my breakup had been. I had lost almost everything, and as a gesture of goodwill, he had extended a hand and offered his cabin to me. It was a welcome sanctuary, and upon arrival I found myself blissfully calm. The woods were alive with sound, the creak of wood, the gentle rustle of wind through the leaves, the chirp of birds in conversation. It was all so serene. The first couple days were wonderful, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. The horrible legal battle I had been engaged in with my wife had taken the wind out of my sails, but out here I let the warm breeze envelope me with new life and energy. To my surprise, it had been beautiful the first couple days, the gentle golden rays of sunlight filtering through the canopy of green overhead. The first 3 days I spent a lot of time walking through the woods, isolated from everything and everyone. I was alone out here, a stranger to the surrounding green kingdom. I let my mind wander free from the chains it had been bound with, my thoughts drifting towards what I would do with my new life. Possibilities began to blossom before me, and I actually started discovering hope in my future again. But then the rain came. I had heard on the news that a 7-day storm was headed my way, so it came as no surprise when the sky darkened. As a resident of Washington, I was no stranger to long bouts of rain, and this was no different. I had just finished eating dinner when the rain started. Gentle pitter-patters on the roof that eventually evolved into a full-blown gale. I started a fire and pulled a chair up to the window, watching the storm. It was cozy, and I found peace in watching the chaos that I was protected from. And then I heard something on the roof. I cocked my ear to listen. The small cabin lit only by the glow of the fireplace. At first I thought it was just the rain, but after a few moments I realized it sounded like someone was running around up there. I didn't know what to make of it, assuming it had to be some kind of animal, but it sounded much bigger. I grabbed the blanket off of the chair I was sitting in and pulled it up to my chin, creeped out by the noise. After a little bit, the sound stopped. My heart was in my throat and my eyes darted to the front door. Thunder boomed overhead and I suddenly felt incredibly far away from civilization. I shivered, despite the fire, and turned my eyes to look out the window I was sitting in front of. Lightning flashed and I suddenly leaned forward, heart racing. Something wasn't right out there. I thought my eyes had to be playing tricks on me, and I anxiously waited for more lightning. I forced myself to calm down, sure that what I had just seen was paranoia brought on by fear. The world was illuminated once again by a bright blast of lightning, and my eyes went wide. Mere feet from the window, the rain seemed to bend around the shapes of 3 invisible figures. They stood about 6 feet tall, the rain outlining their still forms. I swallowed hard, waiting for another blast of lightning, and when it came, the shapes remained. They were immobile, and I suddenly felt eyes on me, as if they had come with the storm to watch me. I retreated from the window, feeling exposed and afraid, and went and sat on my bed. I was terrified, so shaken by the bizarre forms that I began to have a hard time breathing. I took a few long, deep pulls of air, willing myself to settle down. As my heart rate slowed, I started convincing myself that I had imagined the shapes. Between the rain and the dark, it was easy to mistake shadows and shapes that weren't actually there. Just as I was about to get back up, I heard something walking on the roof again. I gripped the sides of my bed as I listened to the heavy footsteps walk closer, and then finally stopped directly over my head. I crawled between my covers and held my breath, eyes wide in a panic. What the hell was out there? Another flash of lightning lit the sky, and I glanced at the window. It was right there, its invisible form parting the rain like a curtain. It was watching me. I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled the covers over my head. I heard myself whimpering and slapped a hand over my mouth. What were these things? What did they want? And then a thought slammed into me with the force of a locomotive. Where was the third one? And that's when I heard the front door crash open. I cried out in fear, shaking like a child, as heavy, wet footsteps walked across the cabin towards me. It stopped by the side of my bed, and I felt drops of water falling from its body onto my blanket. I could hear it breathing, a sucking sound pulled deep into its moist lungs. As I balled into myself under the covers, terrified, it spoke. "Look at me." Its voice sounded like rain, an odd stuttered inflection of its vocal cords. I didn't move, didn't breathe, praying that this nightmare would end. I didn't know what these things were, what they wanted, but I sensed danger. I sensed they wanted to hurt me, and I sensed that if I looked at them, they could. I stayed balled up under my blankets and kept my trembling mouth shut. "Look at me," it repeated in the same wet voice, its words dribbling from its mouth like running water. Again, I didn't move. I was absolutely paralyzed with fear. I kept my eyes closed and the blanket firmly over me. My stomach churned with terror and my breath was hot in the enclosed space. I don't know how long I waited. Eventually, I heard the thing retreat, slamming the door behind it. Even with it gone, I remained where I was, refusing to move. I listened to the rain crash down above me, the relentless storm never ceasing in its violence. I don't know if I fell asleep or passed out, but the next thing I remember was opening my eyes to dim gray light. I hesitantly pulled the blanket from me and surveyed the cabin. The fire had died out, and the scene before me was still in the early morning light. The rain still thundered overhead as sheets of it were driven from the dark sky. I slowly got out of bed and went to the window. "Please," I muttered, voice cracking. The three figures stared back at me, the rain outlining their still figures. I dropped to the floor, out of sight, a hand to my chest. I crawled over to the small kitchen and reached up to retrieve my cell phone. It wasn't there. I jumped to my feet, scouring the surface for where I knew I left it the previous night. It was gone, but a long, wet, dark smudge stained the wood, starting at the center and running to the edge. That thing had taken my phone. I was trapped. "What do you want from me?" I screamed. "What the fuck do you want from me?" The storm offered me no answer. "Leave me alone," I whispered. "Just leave me alone. Please." It's been 3 weeks. The storm hasn't ceased. I don't know what's happened. Something is seriously wrong. The sky remains a dim gray, the day-night cycle stuck in some horrific limbo. I don't think I'm ever getting out of this cabin. I'm almost out of food, and I wonder how long I can last before starvation drives me outside these walls. They're still there, the endless rain painting their figures in the air. They watch always. They watch. When I hear one of them running across the roof, I sprint to my bed and bury myself under the covers. As soon as I do, another slams the front door open and comes to stand over me. It tells me to look at it, commands me to look at it. I can't. I won't. Something about its voice has begun to sound familiar. The more it speaks to me, the more I have begun to recognize it. It sounds like me. And last night, when one of them was standing over my bed, it said something different. It told me that things should have been different. It told me it was disappointed in the way my life had turned out. It told me I needed to acknowledge my mistakes. It told me it was time to let another one of them try. A rainy night. I find comfort in the rain. The pitter-patter of raindrops on my bedroom window soothes my jaded soul. For a short moment, I feel at ease, watching the water run down the battered street and into the storm drains. The little drops fall into a black abyss as the wind screams in terror. I hear my mom coming up the stairs, her footsteps easily recognizable. "Michael, get your ass to bed, you have school tomorrow," she shouts as she passes by my lair. I shoot back with a quick "all right," and then proceed to shut off my PC. After a long day of doing absolutely jack shit, a little bit of shut-eye is exactly what I need. I must recover my strength for the arduous quest that lies ahead of me. I perform the average ritual, brush the teeth, tidy up the room, shut the curtains, turn off the lights, the usual. I yawn as I toss my socks into my sky blue hamper and crawl into bed, finding myself alone in a cozy void. The only thing that brightens the room is a sliver of pale moonlight that peeks out from a slit in the curtains. I'm comfortable, collected, and for once, not worrying about dumb antics I got into years ago. My thoughts begin to drift off as my conscience fades. My muscles begin to relax as all of my doubts are drowned out by the howling wind and rain. Then, I hear it, sharp and sudden against my window. Thump! I snap out of my trance. Thump! Thump! Instinctively, I jolt up from where I'm laying, my full attention on those white curtains. Thump! My thoughts begin to race as I ponder the source of this intrusion. It's definitely not a person, as my bedroom is on the second floor of my house. Maybe it's a bird, although I don't know why it'd be out in weather like this, or perhaps a branch from the nearby tree blowing in the wind. I shrug it off and lay back down. The noise persists, its rhythm inconsistent. It's quite obnoxious, but I could probably sleep through it. Thump, thump. The noise overpowers the sound of the wind and rain. I jolt up again. Now I'm truly curious. I know it's nothing. I know I'm not going to be greeted by a serial killer on a ladder, but I'd at least like to know what the hell is trying to bust through my window at 10:30. The bed creaks as I get up. I walk over to the curtains, the sound becoming more apparent as I get closer. Slowly, gently, my hand raises towards the window. I hesitate. Anxiety creeps up on me, gnawing at the back of my mind. It's irrational, but there. Taking a deep breath, I remind myself that there's nothing to worry about. Nobody is outside my window. I let a chuckle slip through my chapped lips. God, this is so stupid. I watch too many horror movies. Now, I have to open the curtains, just to prove to myself that I'm not a coward. I'm not going to be intimidated by the imaginary boogeymen that my mind cooks up when sleep deprived. I take one more deep breath through my nose and open the curtains. There aren't any ladders. There aren't any birds. There aren't any tree branches. But there does stand a strange figure in the cold, wet night. What horrified me wasn't that his eyes were staring directly into mine. It was the fact that he wasn't looking upwards. His beady eyes look straight ahead, piercing my soul as the rainwater runs down his hunched, scraggly back. It glistens off his pale, white skin. No ladder is needed, as his slender, unnerving legs give him all the leverage he needs. He is, to detail it simply, a travesty, a rangy monument to God's failures. I'm paralyzed by the sight of him as my head begins to spin. I feel like I'm going to regurgitate my supper onto the carpet. I open my mouth to scream, to call for help, but only a devastating silence crawls out as I choke on my own fear. A smile grows across his bony face, spreading his paper-thin lips and revealing his jagged teeth. In the blackness of the night, I can see him mouth a long, exaggerated hello before smashing his skinny arms through my window, sending shards of glass and drops of blood flying across my room. The unspoken haunt. I've never told anyone this story before. I didn't want them to think I was crazy, or worse, that it was just a cry for attention. But it's haunted me for years, and I need to get it off my chest. It was a crisp fall evening when my friend Jake and I decided to explore the old two-story house on the edge of town. The place had a reputation, shrouded in mystery and fear. They said it was haunted by the spirit of a woman named Deborah, a figure of pure malevolence. The rumors about Deborah were unsettling. She had started as a humor blogger, her site a light-hearted corner of the internet. But over time, something changed. Her jokes grew darker, her humor more biting. Eventually, she created a more successful humor website, but the laughter seemed to stop there. Deborah's transformation from a jovial writer to a figure consumed by anger was as mysterious as it was tragic. As Jake and I approached the house, the air grew colder, and a sense of dread settled over us. The paint was peeling, windows boarded up, and an eerie silence hung in the air. We pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The first floor was a maze of dusty furniture and cobwebs, but it was the second floor where things took a turn for the terrifying. Climbing the stairs, we felt a heavy presence around us. The hallways were dark, and our flashlights barely cut through the oppressive gloom. We found a room at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. As we stepped inside, the temperature plummeted. In the center of the room was an old desk, papers scattered across it. It seemed untouched for years. Jake reached for a dusty diary, but as soon as he touched it, The room felt charged with electricity. The pages flipped on their own, and we saw her name, Deborah. The diary detailed her descent into madness, her anger pouring out in venomous words. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. We heard a low, menacing growl, and then she appeared. Deborah, her face twisted in rage, eyes burning with spite. She was no longer the humor blogger of her past, but a vengeful spirit. We were frozen in terror as she advanced. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with her malevolence. Jake tried to speak, but his voice was choked with fear. Deborah's presence grew stronger, her anger palpable. We felt her icy breath on our necks, heard her whispers of bitterness and pain. In a moment of clarity, I grabbed Jake's arm and bolted for the door. We raced down the stairs, her furious screams echoing behind us. We didn't stop running until we were far from that cursed house, our hearts pounding, breaths ragged. We never spoke of that night again, but the fear stayed with us. I don't know what Deborah's fate was, or why she became the way she did. But I do know one thing: some stories are best left untold, buried in the shadows where they belong.